Moving on to my top 5 favorite standalones. I've done reviews of every single one of these, so I'm not going to talk a ton about each of them. The first one is We by Yevgeny Zamyatin. This is a dystopian book from the 1920s. It's a very early dystopian book and kind of inspired a lot of dystopian books that came afterwards, like 1984 by George Orwell, Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, and other authors like Kurt Vonnegut and Ray Bradbury were all inspired by this story. This is a Russian book that's been translated in English. I love this book a lot. I like it way more than I like 1984 and Brave New World, because I honestly don't like either of those very much at all. This one I think is just written better. I like the story better. I like everything about it better, honestly. I think the writing in this is just beautiful, and I personally really connected with the writing. I really connected with the style of writing, the way the characters seem to think and talk, and the way the writing was put together really connected with me, way more than any other dystopian classics that I've read. Like I said, full review of this down below. That's actually one of my favorite reviews that I've done, so you should go watch that video to learn more about it. The next one is called Tell the Wolves I'm Home by Carol Rivka Brunt. This is a beautiful, beautiful story about this girl whose uncle has just been diagnosed with AIDS, and it's kind of something that her whole family is dealing with, but her specifically, she feels a really huge connection to her uncle. Her uncle and her are very good friends, and she really loves her uncle, and she really feels her uncle gets her more than anyone else in her family gets her. And again, I just really connected well with this book. I really connected well with the main character, especially the different relationships that are going on in this book are just really well done. The main character is very shy and very anxious and very quiet, and her uncle is this kind of famous painter who's not any of those things at all, and kind of gets into her shell a bit, and like I said, really understands her. Yeah, it's just a very compassionate and beautiful book, and I really, really loved it a lot. One of the books that really has stuck with me after I finished it earlier this year. The next book is We the Drowned by Carsten Jensen. Once again, full review down below. It's a very big book, so I'm going to not really try to explain too much about it. It's basically about this town, and they rely on the sea a lot, and at the same time the town loses a lot of people to the sea, and it really follows characters over generations. Like the main character at the beginning is the father of the main character in the middle. Like it covers like over 100 years and several generations in this town. And as I've said a few times in videos, I really love books that surround the sea and ships and stuff like that in general. This has a bit of adventure in it. It's kind of a historical fiction kind of thing. It also has a tiny bit of magical realism to it. Characters are really great, despite the fact that we kind of go between generations. We really do get a really great look into the characters before we move on to the new characters, and we really see the town as a character. And there's this other like kind of third element where the narrator is kind of a character, but we don't really know who it is. It's told from this kind of we perspective, and I go into depth a bit about this in my full review, and it's just a really interesting way to see a book written, that this we kind of exists throughout the entire book. We never necessarily know who we is. Like we could be referring to the town as a whole, or the lost people, the people that the town has lost, the people who have drowned. And really, it's just beautifully written. I love the writing in this book, and I'm really happy that I read it. The next one is another Brandon Sanderson book. I felt like I just really wanted to put this one here in the Standalones, just because it was a huge surprise to me, and I really, really loved it a lot. And that is Warbreaker, and this is a standalone. It's going to have a sequel at some point, but right now it's a standalone, and it's one of the only books in Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere that's a standalone. It takes place on a completely different world than his other books, and for this one, I just really felt like the characters in this one are some of the best characters that he's written. I think they have the best progression, the most natural progressions. Like I start out feeling one way about all of the characters at the beginning, and then I feel a completely different way about them at the end, and the progression, that kind of natural growth that you see in them, just is really well done. And I also find this book to be really funny. I love one of the characters specifically called Light Song. He's really funny, has some of the best funny moments, and also just a really interesting magic system, really interesting world in general. Like with all of his books, we get a glimpse into the history, the religions, the politics, just everything that's happening in the world at the time that the book takes place. If you're going to read a Brandon Sanderson book, you don't know where to start, and you don't necessarily want to start with a series, I really recommend picking this one up first. This also just has a really interesting place within Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere universe. You don't need to know anything about the Cosmere to enjoy it, but when you do know stuff about the Cosmere, this has some seriously cool implications on that. And I just really hope, if you haven't read this one yet, because maybe you've heard that it's not as good as his other books, that you'll ignore that and pick it up anyway, because it's amazing and I loved it. There's a kind of combined review that I literally just posted of this, combined with Elantris and the Emperor's Soul and Six of the Dusk, so you can go watch that to get a sort of glimpse into my feelings about this book. The last of the Standalones is All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. This is a World War II historical fiction book. It takes place kind of switching perspectives between this girl in France and this boy in Germany. I literally just did a review of this. I mainly posted that review so I could mention it in this, so I could link to it and kind of give you more thoughts on it in that video, so I wanted to do it in this video. That is a pretty quick review, so if you just want to go watch that and see my full thoughts on it. But I will say that the writing in this is beautiful. I think the way it's laid out is beautiful. The chapters are really, really short, and we kind of go back and forth between time, and in a way it kind of makes the writing stand out more, because if we had these really long chapters of this beautiful writing, it might be kind of tedious at times, but the way he does it, the way the short chapters are, just kind of looks like little vignettes into what's happening at a certain moment in these characters' lives. It kind of just goes really well with the writing, and the writing just seems fresh and new every time you begin a new little chapter. The German boy is kind of against his will put into the Hitler Youth. He has like this obsession with technology and radios, and the girl is blind. She loves to read, and she loves her father. Her and her father are kind of running away from a lot of things, and I think the way the two stories are put together, kind of his juxtapositions against each other and then come together as the book goes on, just really works. And like I said in my full review, it kind of feels like these characters have the whole world on their shoulders. Like everything that's happening really depends on what they do with themselves. Like these very, very personal stories have this sort of vastness to them that just is really nice. Just a really beautiful book, and you need to go read it, especially if you like historical fiction.